Here at Shut Up and Sit Down, sometimes we make mistakes. Matt recently revisited the excellent Decrypto in video format after passing it by. I was once caught on record saying Bonanza was my favourite Uwe Rosenberg game. But most criminally of all, Mr. Quintin Board Games didn't even properly review The Crew in his top 5 card games video. Now that's not entirely fair, there was and still is a spot of pandemic happening, but I still feel like we did The Crew dirty, because inside these two unassuming little boxes are two of the best card games available on the market right now. They are absolute dynamite and contain a system that won them the Kennespiel de Jahre, which roughly translates to game in a jar. 2 games? That's right, de jouets. You see, this is a review of both The Crew and the new Crew, Mission Deep Sea, or just The Crew 2 if you're me, and also lazy. If you've already played the original Crew and obviously loved it, you can skip to this timestamp to just hear me talk about the new Crew, Mission Deep Sea. But in this video, I'm gonna get into why both games work. I'm not gonna get into the minutiae of what makes this different to this. I'm gonna talk about the system as a whole and how the new game improves upon the original. But let me wet your whistle before we get into some big old rules. I think both The Crew and The Crew 2 New Crew are card games that are so good they should be stocked in every game store. They should be on the shelf at Waterstones, they should be behind the counter at only the coziest English pubs, and of course, they should be in your collection. But before I get into why these card games are so special and some of my favourites of all time, I need to tell you about trick-taking games. A trick-taking game is a descriptor that encompasses a broad variety of card games that share a common language, one that the Crew speaks fluently. Each player is going to start the game with a hand of cards, and one player is going to lead the first trick. This basically just means playing a card into the center of the table, because the trick kind of just means the round in the verbiage of other games that you might be more familiar with. So let's see how the rest of this first trick pans out. This is Max Gland, and he's about to play his first card in a trick-taking game. He decided to lead this trick with a 6 of yellows and is very proud of himself. The next player will now have to play a card from their hand, and because Max before them picked a yellow card, if Bruce has a yellow card, he absolutely must play it regardless of number. Bruce has to play his 4 of yellows, lower than the 6 that Max chose before him. Is this good? Bad? Well, the highest number is going to win, so Bruce is out of luck this round. Our third player doesn't have any yellows in his hand at all. Disaster! But there's a silver lining. If you don't have any of the leading colour, you can play whatever you want. But by playing a card that isn't the leading colour, yellow in this case, he cannot win the trick, regardless of number. Blue 7, shut it. Pink 8, you're taking the mick. Green 9, I am literally going to vomit. Our fourth player also doesn't have any yellow cards, but he does have an ace up his sleeve. The final kind of card are these trump cards, which automatically win regardless of what else is on the table. So this one of submarines trumps all these other cards. But remember, you still have to follow suit if possible. Fortunately, he does not have any yellows, so he can whack this one down and win the trick. Wait, if I'm he and you're me, then which one of us is the real one? Now, once everyone has played a card, the highest yellow or highest trump will win the trick, and the player who played that card takes the whole trick and scores it, placing it next to them, and they then lead the next trick. All these rules, and where is the joy? Well, usually a trick-taking game will have a weird twist to keep things interesting. Claim has you winning one kind of game to then score points in another. Stick'em highlights a particular card that'll score you negative points. And Bridge has you lining up for potato paste at the old people's home. And now we finally arrive at The Crew, a game that takes everything you know about card games, adds in the magic of trick-taking before giving you a generous splosh of very good game. But that's not to forget that within the mixture is just a dash of the finest magic. It takes all of that, pops it in a shaker, and then just goes to town. Bon appetit! The Crew is a cooperative, mission-based trick-taking game where you're trying to get the right cards to the right players at the right time in order to progress through an overarching campaign of trick-taking missions. At the start of each of the 50 missions in The Crew, you'll read some delightfully banal flavor text considering the subject matter. You've just started your training. You're about to do some more training, but someone has food poisoning. You're putting your seatbelt on for liftoff. You're searching your colleagues on LinkedIn before realizing it tells you who views your profile. You'll then take a peek at the difficulty of the mission and draw a number of task cards depending on how hard that mission is. You'll start by just drawing one, but then as the game goes on, you'll draw more and more of these cards that have to be distributed amongst all the players. Now, these task cards might look familiar. They're just smaller versions of the existing big playing cards, and they show a specific card that a specific player has to win in that round. Complete all the tasks by winning the right cards, and you have won the mission. Now, you'd be forgiven for thinking that this sounds incredibly simple. Imagine having the objective win the blue 6 when you have the blue 9. Just get your friend to play the 6, slap down your 9, Bob's your uncle, everyone thinks the game is rubbish. But the game puts you in trickier scenarios very quickly. What about winning the blue 6 when the highest blue you have is a 2? What about winning 3 different yellows when you've only got 1 in your hand? Or what about winning the blue 9 with no blue cards and no trump cards? You're alone, afraid, and an idiot. And every time you have to work through that problem together, tooling out an exact route between each card in the game, working cohesively as a team like you're manning the limbs on a giant cardboard octopus, and then the game keeps throwing escalating challenges at you in each mission. You can't win any tricks with 9s. You've got to win 2 tricks with 1s. Do the tasks in this horrible, unhelpful order. But no matter how hard these tasks get, how much the odds may seem stacked against you, they are always possible, ready to be popped open by a smart play like a pomegranate, full of fun. This is a game where you and your friends will be actively resisting the rules of trick-taking, trying your best to thread the needle and make things possible. This is a game where you're excitedly chatting about your options on every single Oh no.
Tom, after reviewing your footage, we've concluded that you've been talking for too long without mentioning the twist. You're leading these people down a meandering path, and you know it.
Please, Mr. Manager, I only meant to save the best till last, like a juicy cherry on the rules blancmange.
Yeah, well, you're on thin ice, Brewster. One more up, and I'm gonna have you up, but for a different company, yeah? The Tower, that bunch of
Wow, okay, that's actually really rude.
Tom, I'm so sorry. It's just been a long day. My tablet isn't turned on and my printer's cables aren't connected to anything. Put a banana here just to fill the frame up, but I'm worried it makes me look weird.
No, it's okay. Everyone has bad days. I'll get back to the video now, if that's all right.
All my paperwork. I don't even know what's in here. I just keep it because it makes me feel like an adult.
You're not allowed to talk during the game.
You can't talk during the game. You cannot say words It's a silent board game.
The Crew takes all of those possibilities, thoughts, plans, hands and tasks and strangles them by stopping everyone round the table from using their primary communication hole. You are not allowed to talk shop in this game at all. Everything has to be communicated by what cards you play and when you choose to play them. Each card becoming a suggestion of what you might be carrying in your hand, a little hint to where you want the game to be going right now. But there is one life raft tossed to your flailing selves after this ridiculous revelation, and it's these little communication tokens. Outside of a hand being played, you can opt to communicate, taking one card from your hand and placing it on the table with one of these tokens on it. And where you place that token will communicate a different piece of information. Place the token at the top, it's your highest card of that colour, the bottom if it's your lowest of that colour, and the middle if it's your only of that colour. And you get one of these, and once you've used it, that is it. This communication bottleneck is what turns this game into something entirely different. A game of gathering and sharing information at the right time, a game of timing, but also of inference and interpretation, trying to pierce the brains of every other player around the table to get to the bottom of what they mean when they play the pink 9 on the third hand. I've previously talked about how games like The Mind pull off this lovely magic trick of connecting people around a deck of cards, sure, but more importantly to each other. But whilst the puzzle in The Mind is ultimately one of actual physical tempo, the puzzle in The Crew is so much richer and more varied. This is a game of dredging information bit by bit out of your friends, pulling them through an increasingly challenging puzzle. And this is all laid on top of card play that is fun, strategic, snappy, and exciting. Honestly, you could probably play some of the later missions in The Crew while talking the whole time and still have fun on a strategic level. And with those later missions, it's important to mention that The Crew manages to pull off a bizarre magic trick, where it is always challenging, but almost never unfair. And on the rare occasion that it is unfair or impossible because of the spread of cards you've been dealt and the way that the tasks have panned out, you can just set it up instantly and go again. Failure is immediate in a way that has you playing this game over and over again. I have never played a game as many times in a row as I've played The Crew, either because we came so close to victory or because we were just excited to see what new challenges were round the corner. And while we're on the topic of failure and trying to avoid it, I adore the fact that this game is almost impossible to quarterback, because talking, telling someone what to do, literally isn't allowed by the game. And because of the relative myopia on actual information round the table, it's also really hard to point out where someone in particular is going wrong or misplaying. I think that that's what turns this game into something that's kind of empathetic, because you don't know what another player is holding, and you need to have a huge amount of self-confidence in making judgments on what to do when with the sliver of information that you personally possess, which makes it into a game that is rooted in true cooperation, trust, and teamwork. And that is what makes the post-mission debrief in The Crew so electric. There's been this puddle of information that's been simmering under every player's brains for the past 10 minutes. And then when you win or lose, it just floods out in this huge tirade of information, laughter, and chatter. Like everyone has been starving for oxygen for the past 10 minutes on their last reserves in their tank, and then, whew, breathe, chat, relax. We won, we didn't, but either way, we're going to talk about it. And so that is The Crew, one of the best card games that money can buy. And as well as that, one of the best ratios of fun to pounds, excitement to dollars, good game to krona. This is absolutely a shut up and sit down, recommends seal. No further questions. Unless that question is, should I buy The Crew 2 instead? Coming soon, or somewhat around, depending on where you live, we've got a sequel to The Crew, Mission Deep Sea, swapping out empty space for wet space in an undersea trick-taking adventure. The best way to describe Mission Deep Sea might be that it's a half remixed, half revised version of the original game. Perhaps a little bit more elegant, perhaps a little bit weirder and more strange, but nevertheless an embarrassment of riches for fans of the original, and just as good a puzzle for those new to the system. The biggest change that Mission Deep Sea brings, alongside its 30 new missions, is a new way of setting the difficulty within those missions. Previously in the crew, you'd just draw cards equal to the difficulty, but now you've got a value you have to reach, with tasks all having different individual difficulties. Let's say you've got a 9 difficulty mission for a 3-player game. You'll pull cards until you've got 9 worth of 3-player cards, which could look like this, or even this. There are so many of these tasks that it boggles the mind, and they're so much more varied and interesting than the standard win this card that you find in the Crew 1. There are so many that the game encourages you to keep the ones that you've already done separate from the rest in the box, so you will never do the same task twice, or at least you won't do the same task for a long time. And this is brilliant. It makes every single hand, every trick more chewy and knotty and interesting. I love this new system. Alongside this, the modifiers for missions in New Crew are just as nuts as the original, with the addition of real-time missions that are hellacious, but maybe contain one of the best feelings I've had in games this year when completed. Looking at this horrible task that was laid out in front of us before setting the timer and just playing perfect hand after perfect hand, nailing every single task in perfect sync, oh my goodness, whoo baby, that's card games. So yes, heaping on this complexity and challenge spiderwebs the game outwards into greater puzzles that are more rewarding, but also, I'd wager, maybe a bit less beginner-friendly. Let's put it this way, in the Crew 1, you would have weird timing modifiers, take this first, take this last, etc, etc, but they would sit on top of an existing array of tasks, and they'd only start throwing those in once you are more used to the system. In the Crew 2, those timing considerations are baked into this deck, meaning that you need to care about them from the moment you start playing the game. The Crew 2 has a shorter campaign, but that's kind of a good thing. It means you're getting into the more intense challenges much faster. But it means if you're new to the system, those gradual incremental changes might be a little bit missed. Also new to Mission Deep Sea is a 2-player mode, which I think is really rather good, if a little bit trickier to set up and tear down if you're playing multiple missions in a row. It basically has you controlling a third open-handed friend who'll reveal new information when you pick up cards from their row. I think it's great, and it will bond you with the person opposite you at the table like nothing else. I think it's good. However, this mode also did make me feel like this game had less of the Cruise 1. This mode is where I found that the Crew 2 sometimes will deal you hands that feel much less solvable than in the Crew 1, spoiling that magic of feeling like you've always got a chance. Sometimes you will just deal out a hand and go, no way, or at least it will feel that way. But take that with a generous pinch of salt, because I have played way more of the original Crew than I have of New Crew. This is kind of me giving some first impressions. I think I might like it more just because these task cards are so weird, but remains to be seen over like 20 plus plays. I've played it like 9 times. At the end of the day, who are these games not for? Well, certainly they're intense enough to not fit in the category of relaxing card game to kill time with your mates, which is normally what I look for in this kind of sized card game. So this is an outlier for me. But I think it's an outlier because it's really special. And even though the rules are quite hostile to the normal way you play a card game, it creates an experience that is intense, sure, but way more magic than it has any right to be. And I think that's because it locks all the information in the game into your hands and the hands of the players around the table. It means that at any point, just playing one card is going to have repercussions that everyone feels. This is a game that ultimately feels like you're all tethered to a life support system in a hostile environment where one slip will cost you the game. And that might not be your cup of tea, but if it is, they're blimmin' brilliant. And the fact that there is a combined total of 80 missions in between both of these games means that it's a game that will grow with the group that you spring it on. Over time, you're going to develop a shared language, a bond, a trust, and a melding of the minds that no other game can really accomplish. And maybe the best way of illustrating that is just by telling you a really short story. We were in a game of Mission Deep Sea on the very last round of a particularly difficult mission. We had loads of tasks to get through, and we were on the last one. A simple task, but with so few cards and with so much information face down in trick-taken piles during the game, we just didn't know what to expect on that round. We were going into the unknown. And at that moment, one of the players slightly breaks the rules of the communication in the game and takes a card from his hand, and he says, "Do you trust me?" and puts that card face down on the table. And in that moment, that card represented something else. It was mystery. It was a Schrodinger's cat of possibilities. In this card, there was joy, there was defeat, there was intrigue. This card was something completely different. It was something we'd never seen before in any of these games. But at that moment, it wasn't that. It wasn't that at all. It was none of those things. It was just a playing card.